Warm greetings, everyone. I am Jacqueline Bethel Mugwe, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of African Cultural Studies. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Okechukwu Nwafor, who is a professor of art history and painting at the Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Accra, Nigeria. He was a Forsyth postdoctoral fellow at the Department of the History of Art at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where he taught 2 fabulous courses in 2019. He is the author of one of my favorite books, Eso Ebi, Dress, Fashion, Visual Culture, and Urban Cosmopolitanism in West Africa, newly published by the University of Michigan Press this year. His articles have appeared in top-tier journals, including Post-Colonial Studies, African Studies, Journal of Contemporary African Art, Critical Intervention, African Art, Critical Critique, and last but not least, Fashion Theory. His second book project is provisionally titled The Ubiquitous Image, Funeral Photography and Visibility in Nigeria. The book examines how new technology of vision radically transformed obituary and funeral rituals in Nigeria over the past decades. So he examines the modern economy of the funeral rituals through visuals and how it is portrayed in social media and how this has produced new cultural meanings around death and mourning. He argues that as funerals are transformed into prestigious events through technologies of glamour, funeral photographs acquire new meanings of prestige, spirituality, remembrance, and materiality as they navigate the global spaces of the social media. But for now, we will return to his recently published book, and he will be giving a talk based on this book. And I'm sure everyone like me is excited to learn more. Before we begin, I wanted to share with everyone to feel free to send any thoughts, comments, and insights in the chat or in the Q&A box, which can usually be found in the bottom right corner of your screen. We here at African Studies program wanted to plan an SOEB outfit, but with work and childcare duties, we did not have time. So I myself would like to ask a question in the Q&A about the labor, energy, and time of organizing uniforms for an event. All right, let us give a virtual round of applause for Professor Nwafor. You are now at the center of focus.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jackie, for introducing me. That was a fantastic one. And I'm so happy to be here. Unfortunately, because of the erratic internet facility we have here, I was able to pre-record my presentation, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I am so happy and so excited to present my paper to this important forum. My paper is titled Aswebi, Fractured Materiality and the Political Economy of Intimacy. Aso in Yoruba word means cloth, while Ebi in Yoruba also means family. The literal translation is family cloth. Historically, it is thought to have originated among the Yoruba who live in the western part of Nigeria, but recently it has expanded beyond Nigeria to even the West African sub-regions. In earlier times, Aswebi revolved around the narrow categories of family networks: the man, the wife, their children, their relatives, and the extended families. It is especially employed during funerals where relatives of the family wore the same uniformed garment to differentiate themselves from the crowd. I have shown in my work, and also some sources have suggested how Asoebi began in Yoruba land as a funeral uniform worn during the funeral rites of a family member. During the funeral rites, anyone seen in uniform is immediately identified as a member of the deceased family. In certain occasions, it was only the children of the deceased that were required to put on the uniform. Ayodeji Olukoju, in his article on post-World War I maritime economy in Lagos, has also shown how Asoebi started in Lagos and Nigeria in the context of the stupendous and unprecedented accumulation occasioned by the post-World War boom of 1918 to 1920. Through what I call historical reconstruction, I was able to investigate this particular statement, and through archival research, I was able to pinpoint the exact time at which Asoebi was deployed. That slogan, Asoebi, was deployed by the urban inhabitants of Lagos. And I discovered that that was exactly between 1910 and 1920. Before I continue, even let me say something about my book, because this paper I'm presenting is a chapter from my book. And my book, published this year by the University of Michigan Press, is titled Asoebi, Dress, Fashion, Visual Culture and Urban Cosmopolitanism in West Africa. In this book, through Asoebi, I examine the rise of fashion practices in Lagos and how this has provoked and heightened a unique kind of urban visibility in Nigeria. I investigate how Asoebi has been deployed as a social uniformed dressing and an embodiment of the multiple aspects of cosmopolitan modernity in Nigeria. Indeed, I suggest that both fashion and photography constituted themselves into a powerful visual culture, and both became two inseparable aspects of cosmopolitan modernity that Nigerians sought before and after colonialism in the 1960s, during the economic crisis of the 1980s, and during the rise of digital photography and radical printing technology in the 21st century. I show how the wide ramifications of Asoebi dress have transformed an entire city's visual culture and stand as a formidable playground for exciting fashion experiences and experiments. You see, what I have actually done in this book is simply to use Asoebi to argue that local fashion practices and consumption in Nigeria produced shifting modes of social relations, changes in moral, visual, and political economies, as well as different forms of cultural interrelationships in the city of Lagos since the 1960s. I believe that one of the most significant contributions that I have made in this scholarship is to build an archive for Asoebi, an archive that was literally non-existent. For example, before the 1930, Asoebi had started attracting what appears to be the first wave of condemnation from well-meaning Yoruba people. This condemnation became so ubiquitous that the church management in Lagos convened a Christian interdenominational committee in 1930 on the issue of Asoebi. The committee, which met at the Lagos CMS Girls Seminary in Lagos, was spread across the Methodist, Catholic, Baptist, and Anglican missions. According to Marion Johnson, one of the Anglican delegates to the committee, and I quote, "The committee, after their deliberations, agreed that the craze for Asoebi in many homes was on the increase, that many married women unreasonably participate in Asoebi, thereby worsening the financial crisis of their various families. The women also destabilize the peace of their families by constantly extorting clothing allowances from their husbands who barely managed to feed the family. Some of them also got Asoebi on credit from the celebrant, who usually distributed the cloth to well-wishers expecting their husbands to pay eventually, unquote. The committee's unilateral resolve was that Asoebi was a threat to the unity of the church and families. Incessant Asoebi debts stretched the husbands beyond their financial reach, as their wives participated in an average of 4 Asoebi events per month and incurred corresponding debt. The findings also observed a contributing factor to this vice: the cloth merchants who gave out Asoebi textile materials on credit to women, thereby increasing the cycle of indebtedness. The findings indicated that the church would not be held responsible for this mad rush for Asoebi and recommended that while the Asoebi tradition should not be banned, they advised practitioners to demonstrate moderation. Moderation in all aspects of the Christian's life, including Asoebi, seemed to form the bedrock of the church's subsequent sermons. In early 20th century Lagos, the pace at which Asoebi provoked urban fashion sensibilities, especially among women, was also the same pace with which it generated household crises. Asoebi became a sort of social menace in urban Lagos, in that girls began to demand it as part of their engagement presents, thus instigating the colonial government and the Ijebu to ban it in 1940. In 1946, many young women deceived young men into purchasing expensive dresses for their engagement and eventually disappointed the young men and left them in debt. Some further criticisms of Asoebi appeared in the 1940s newspapers, where, for example, one critic alleged that the church encouraged Asoebi patronage during its harvest and bazaars, and that the children who attended the church mission schools were compelled to pay for festival cloth levies. This critic argued that as long as Asoebi was associated with Christian religious worship, the solution would lie with the church. From the 1960s, Asoebi began to be redefined in line with the cultural and socio-economic changes that came with late global capitalism. Within Asoebi practice in the city of Lagos, meanings of friendship, solidarity, camaraderie, and wealth have undergone radical transformation as more people migrated to the city after Nigeria's independence in 1960. From the 1970s through the 1980s, individuals were compelled by the economic conditions to adopt new modes of Asoebi practice. For example, new types of textile materials used for Asoebi expanded to include cheaper textiles imported from China and elsewhere. So instead of offering Asoebi free, individuals sold it to their friends, and within such transactions, politics of exclusion and inclusion ensued. I want to say something about the 1980s and the 1990s Nigeria. You see, this was exactly the period when the World Bank economic policy of a structural adjustment program had a devastating toll on the lives of the middle class. The middle class were literally eroded, and in an attempt to reinvent themselves, the middle class engaged in so many spectacular visual cultural practices. And this is a way to show the dominant elite class who were connected to the corrupt military officials that they wanted to announce their presence. The middle class aspired to announce their presence in the scheme of things. And by doing that, they engaged in Asoebi practice, and in an attempt, they also attempted to appear in some of these soft sell fashion magazines as a way of proving to the elite class that they could also be as visible and important as themselves. From the 1990s through the year 2000, the rise of digital photography and the emergence of a radically new printing technology ushered in a new mode of fashioning asoebi. By this period, digital cameras and devices had become ubiquitous in Lagos. An increasing visual agency was beginning to manifest itself among city dwellers through such devices as camera phones. Here, asoebi cloth, serving as textiles, allow Nigerians to redefine their relationship to a certain urban fashionability that was disseminated by Western sartorial styles and photographic genres. A theoretical reconstruction of this fashionability suggests that asoebi and digital photography belong to what I call surface aesthetics, in which the body is the surface upon which the banalities of late capitalist sensibilities are inscribed. And this is a phrase, a slogan that I borrowed from Didier Gondola, who has suggested that the social and economic chaos that characterize the African city grafts itself onto the bodies of youth. Now, from this perspective, getting shiny, digitally reconstructed bodies consummates the city dwellers' entry into the world of perfection. It provides them with a symbolic satisfaction of abundance and prosperity, thus allowing them to reproduce a body that was an alternative metaphor for a chaotic social world. And this is actually what happens and what most Nigerians attempt to fulfill when they engage in asoebi practice. Nigerian society is one in which XX, in all its ramifications, is the hallmark of wealthy livelihoods. It is a society where the idea of class and social statuses are always enacted by visible emblems of affluence in social gatherings. You see monies exchanging hands and textile materials being displayed. This is actually one of my motivations for investigating the visual cultural practices that circulate around asoebi. Between the 1960s and the year 2000, variations in asoebi textile materials and dress designs witnessed remarkable transformation. So I looked at the visual culture that surrounded the textiles. I have traced these changes through the visual archive of J. Dokai Ojekere's photograph in Lagos, which he allowed me access in 2009. If you look at slide 2, you would see the photograph of J. Dokai Ojekere's photograph in the 1960s. I compared the 1960s asoebi photographs with the present day, and the variations in uniformity and choice of fabric was quite revealing. You see, the women, if you look at this slide 2, you see the women are putting on matching uniforms. The headscarves are the same in terms of materials, even styles. The blouse, which is a lace material, the hand bangles, the skirts, which seem to stop at the knee level, and then if you also look at their shoes. This particular dress style in slide 2 is quite different from what we find in slide 3. See, this young man he's a photographer who attended this wedding ceremony, and he went, I was actually there, he went and whispered to the ears of this lady, and this lady stepped out and engaged in this photo session. You see the dress here is free-flowing, while in slide 2 you see the skirt is quite different. Perhaps I argued that this group is apparently responding to the fad of the 1960s miniskirt invented by Mary Quant. Asoebi's significance as a form of fashion at this point cannot be overemphasized. It is arguable that although asoebi is seen as a form of cultural practice, its miniskirt styles here in the 1960s nonetheless might also suggest that fashion was loosening the grip of culture which asoebi has on the body. In these photos, the style of sewing is deserving of proper historicizing. We see the rigid, a sort of rigid adherence to the Ashwebi's uniformity in this photo. While, for example, you look at this particular slide 5 in Mrs. Oniru's birthday party, we find something different. We see that although the uniformity was not very strong, but we still find the same uniformity in their headscarf. Actually, this is the point I want to take us through some of these slides so that we understand what is happening in these photographs. As I said initially, slide 5 is Mrs. Oniru's birthday party. Her friends have attended this birthday dressed in the same uniformed headscarf, and of course the ones they tied around their waist to celebrate with Mrs. Oniru. If you look at their faces, they are all smiling. Many of them are smiling, showing that they are happy with this event. Then if you look at slide 6, you would see that this magazine, Ovation magazine, published Mrs. Oniru's birthday party on their page. And if you look at the caption says, "What society people wore at Mrs. Oniru's 50th birthday." Ovation magazines deemed it necessary to use dress to caption this story, because they felt that the dress, the fashion is one of the, if not the most important aspect of this birthday party. Then you look at slide 7. Slide 7, look at the matching uniformity. It's very striking. The headscarf, the blouse, the long flowing skirts, gown, and then the handbags. They are all spectacular. Then let's quickly look at slide 8. Slide 8, these women attended this event. Look at the right, these women on the right flanked, who flanked the couple on the right hand side. Look at the background, you see different things happening in the background, but if you look at the left, you would see that the background has been photoshopped out, and these people have been removed from the original site of the event. And there are so many things happening in this photograph, which I will come back to maybe in the Q&A session. Then slide 9. Some of the soft sell fashion magazines that emerged in Nigeria in the 1990s, as I said initially, they came to fulfill a mission. They came to fill a vacuum that was created by the economic crisis of the 1990s, in which the middle class believed that this is one of the means they deployed to reinvent themselves. Look at these women in this photo. All these women were women who attended a party or a wedding reception, but they have been singled out and framed in boxes. That framing is important for many reasons. First, you look at the dress styles are different. So their individual styles have been showcased. They have been removed from the sea of uniformity. They have been put into these boxes to show that these are women with subjectivities, that in spite of the uniformity that this dress connotes, that these women also have their own subjectivities and agencies. And the same thing I said initially about J. Dokai Ojekere's photographs in the Ashwebi photographs in the 1960s is also witnessed in this slide 10. Look at the sleeves of these women's blouses. Look at their skirts stopped at the knee, while recently Ashwebi skirts do not stop at the knee. Look at slide 11. You would see how these people dressed in long flowing gowns. Let's quickly go back to slide 9. You discover that the different lack of formal homogeneity in these dresses shows that sartorial individualism was beginning to be expressed in recent times in Asoebi. The dresses actually do not differ in color, but the nature, or not the nature of dress materials, but the styles of sewing altered in this photograph. The uniformity here is in doubt. That is what we discovered here. So the way we see different forms, different styles in slide 9, and that is exactly the way, as I argue, individuals have started to express agency in Asoebi, to question that strong obedience to uniformity of style, uniformity of textile materials and colors that we find in the 1960s photographs of J. Dokai Ojekere. And I argued that the reasons for this lack of strong uniformity on the sociality of Asoebi is as a result of Asoebi's entanglement in the discourse of temporality, local cosmopolitanism, and transcultural encounters. It is within these entanglements beyond the bounds of ethnic categories that I investigate the meanings of friendship and oneness in Asoebi. Here lies the underlying moral economy around Asoebi. So in this instance, I question varying romantic idealization of the world of gift exchange. Now, if you buy a friend's Asoebi and eventually attend the event, at the end of the event, you are compensated with a gift. And that's why I question this romantic idealization of gift exchange by showing how far from being politically innocent commodity exchanges such as textiles and Asoebi are. The question I ask is, how do we develop a theory of gift exchange? How do we theorize kinship relations and politics at the same time? And what are the political processes at the heart of my ethnographies? And this is what Annette Wenner has questioned in her book, Inalienable Possessions. I am interested in the kinds of ethnographic interpretations that emerge from these Asoebi transactions, including its gift exchange. How do we begin to re-engage African cultural practices that circle around the notions of what Wenner calls norm of reciprocity, as she has argued in her book? Wenner studied how fabric was made and used as political and sacred repositories of wealth. In other words, I needed to expand the discourse to include the making, circulation, and use of fabric and textile in connection with human sociality in contemporary post-colonial city of Lagos, and even in my broader analysis in visual cultural phenomena such as popular photography, camera phones, and the general visibility Asoebi entails in urban Lagos. A report in the Lagos Standard of February 24, 1915, lamented the increasing cost of Asoebi in Lagos weddings. The report stated how parents of the bride invite the female friends of their daughter to buy Asoebi from them at a cheap price, and how what it described as marking up increased the price of the Asoebi from its initial 5 shillings to 30 shillings. The writer dismissed Asoebi as a material of, and I quote, a light and flimsy nature, and choosing more with reference to gay coloring, so that the dress, as a rule, is only fit to be worn on that single occasion and is quite unsuitable for ordinary wear, unquote. The writer further worried over the introduction of iborun, a piece that covers the shoulder, and a silk handkerchief that swelled the already considerable expense of the Asoebi. This report is an indication that during the first decade of the 20th century, Asoebi's contestations were framed in terms of monetary disagreement. The above example constructs a picture of an affair that was gradually transforming into an illicit pecuniary transaction as early as the second decade of the 20th century. This transformation, quite modest in this period, is brazen in recent times as Asoebi is sold to strangers for monetary gains. Now, let's quickly go to slide 14. In this slide, we see a lot of women dressed in Asoebi. As a matter of fact, these women numbered more than 100, and they were locked out of a wedding reception of an important politician in Nigeria. You see, they are all dressed in Asoebi that was supposed to be the Asoebi of the wedding, the couple that was wedding that day. But they were locked out for some uncertain reasons. But my investigation showed that they bought Asoebi at a cheaper price from an illegal vendor, a vendor that was not approved by the celebrant. There are so many other stories surrounding the reasons why they were locked out. But the most important thing, the question we should ask is how such categories as friends and family members are construed in the present context of Asoebi practice, considering these women who I'm sure majority of them do not have a bond, do not have a close relationship with the celebrant. But let me just quickly take us through some of my interviews and ethnographic evidences that suggest that this material transaction of Asoebi was beginning to redefine the borders of friendship in urban Lagos. Chioma Okoyozu, a factory worker, and her friends attended their friend's wedding in Lagos on Saturday, March 12, 2011, and they were not offered any food or drink during the reception ceremony. Their friend was the bride and could not have known what transpired. Okoyozu felt so bad that she accosted her friend days after the event. Her friend told her why they were denied food. They did not buy her Asoebi, and food sharers were given an instruction not to serve those not dressed in Asoebi uniform. Okoyozu exclaimed, and I quote and unquote, "That was rubbish and stupid." And she swore never to attend any other event where Asoebi is worn. When Jumoke Adesanya attended the wedding reception of her friend, she observed, and I quote, "There were more than 7 different types of uniformed groups, and I did not fit into any one of them," unquote. Adesanya, who is a seamstress in Lagos, was denied food because she was not in any of the Asoebi. According to her, other people around me were eating and drinking, but I was left without any food except a bottle of malt. So when I demanded the reason, one of the guests behind me said, "It's because I did not wear the Asoebi." I was also not offered any gift. The gift sharers ignored me. It is unfortunate that Asoebi is becoming a big issue in Lagos weddings these days. Now, Wana Udobang, a columnist in a moribund newspaper known as 234 Next newspaper, observes that Asoebi is the only item that can authenticate your affiliations with either bride or groom. Udobang recounts a personal experience in one wedding reception she attended without dressing in Asoebi. And I quote, "We sat there without any food, hoping someone would come to ask us what we would like to eat. We watched as different women in Asoebi marshaled the waiters to different tables while we roved our eyes around the hall, hoping to find a familiar face amidst the sea of orange fabric," unquote. While Udobang's frustration for being ignored because she did not appear in Asoebi was something of concern, she was even more disturbed that even among those who wore Ashebi, there was differentiation and discrimination. There were higher grades of Ashebi which determined the level of VIP treatment available, according to her. And she realized how important this uniform was when the Chinese family who wore Ashebi and who joined them at their table were served Oriental medley, that is according to their choice, while Udobank and Co were left without anything to eat or drink. Antonia Nweke and her friend Bumioke were expected to join a colleague of theirs for their father's 70th birthday celebration. Both Nweke and Oke and their friend work at a shipping company in Lagos. The birthday party was in the Lupeju area of Lagos. They were unaware of an initial plan by their colleague's family to sell Ashebi to any interested guest. This is because their colleague did not inform them of any such plans. The occasion, according to Nweke, was like a carnival, and almost all the guests were dressed in one color of Ashebi or the other. Our friend was busy inside the inner room and we could not see her. We discovered that the people sharing the food never wanted to come to our table. As one of them carrying some plates of food and drinks came across our table, I called him, but he ignored me. Another guy came, and when I asked him to give us food, he said that all food has finished and that the only thing remaining is Coke. In fact, he gave us the Coke. But lo and behold, we saw some other waiters carrying food and passing us. I think they instructed them not to give us food or not to give food to those not dressed in any of their Ashebi. The waiters had clearly been instructed not to serve us. Some women on a table beside us didn't find this funny and were raising their voices at the waiters, saying loudly in Yoruba, "What kind of party is this?" unquote. From the above accounts, it seems that the exclusionary narratives of Ashebi did not boycott friends or family members per se, but those, whether friends or not, who did not adorn Ashebi uniform. This is because the waiters and waitresses cared less of whatever affiliation Nweke and Oke might have with the celebrant. This concept offers one a space to see uniforms as disciplinary constructs that admits, permits, and allows one to develop a sense of security and confidence among a group. This is not just what Ashebi uniforms do, but uniforms in their wider applications, such as military uniforms, security uniforms, police uniforms, among others. Now, we can understand such expressions of solidarity, according to Jody Dean, quote, as a set of shared expectations that constitute a context of meaning central to a group's self-understanding. Underlining the above attitude is the fact that solidarity operates within a notion of a visual and material culture that is both exclusionary and repressive. It shows that, in line with Judith Butler, that solidarity is an exclusionary norm. The conclusion I reached after a series of interviews among more than 50 individuals who have been excluded from various activities because of their failure to adorn Ashebi was that, since about 90% of them spoke very harshly against Ashebi, it means that the genuineness of Ashebi's increasing popularity in present-day Nigeria remains contestable. Moreover, the increasing participation of more people in the practice could hinge on fear of ostracism rather than a fascination or passion for the practice. From the tone of the above exclusionary stories, it seems that most people are not satisfied with the turn Ashebi is presently taking. Their statements suggest a predisposition towards abandoning the practice or rather reviewing it. For example, Uju Doye believes that people have turned Ashebi into a money-making venture and that is the reason why she does not attend functions anymore. According to her, the last time my friend did her traditional marriage, I declined to buy her Asoebi because it was 20,000 naira and I didn't have the money. I later heard from my other friends that she bought the material for 10,000. There is a growing feeling among some Nigerians that Asoebi is gradually dissolving into a system of reciprocal transaction between the guest and the host, with gifts and Asoebi as two contingent fragments of such transactions. In other words, there seems to be a mutual correspondence existing between the two parties of guest and host. While the guest bought Asoebi from the host compensated the guest with a gift in return. However, such correspondences have been attacked by some critics who believe that the gains pander towards the hosts, who sell the Asoebi at a higher price and use parts of the proceeds to purchase cheap gifts. The hosts have been criticized for offering gifts that are in no way commensurate to the prices of the Asoebi bought by the guests. A counter-argument holds that the guests gain by adding to their wardrobe through the Asoebi dresses while at the same time getting a gift. It therefore follows that in this system, gifts are not offered as gifts, but as a form of recoupment for those who bought Asoebi. Perhaps, in the everyday language use of such words as gift, one may need to invent a new word other than gift for such transactions. In most events in Nigeria, celebrants believe that they exhibit forms of altruism by extending a gesture of gift to people who wear Asoebi, but on the contrary, the denial of gift to those who did not purchase Asoebi may have found empirical validation in the statement that, quote and unquote, reciprocity in itself is a principle of exclusion. I concluded that gifts as they are offered in Asoebi are mute gestures of reciprocal transactions. I have suggested that gifts and Asoebi are two aspects of an inevitable responsibility that confronts particular people who plan for social events in Nigeria. The one goes with the other, such that any failure to adorn oneself in Asoebi attracts no gift. I show that commodification has become the bane of late capitalist sociality, and it seems Asoebi has given in to this form of existence. I suggest that life could be a commodity traded on a shallow surface of material adornment. Perhaps this idea might, in a remote sense, remind us of what the French philosopher Henri Lefebvre calls a false world in his nihilistic articulation of the effects of capitalism's visuality upon humankind. If this false world is worth interrogating, then my research has attempted to pose a critical question. In Nigeria, therefore, the social and cultural valencies of Asoebi as gestures of group conviviality and commensality were overlaid by references to the politics of exclusion and inclusion therein. Here, the body is presented as a political entity upon which varying signs of sartorial and visual cultural contests are played out through the phenomenon of Asoebi. Thank you so much.